In episode 96, titled Final Exam Readiness Drill Audio Practice, you're building a fast, repeatable mental workout that improves decision speed and confidence under exam pressure. Pen Test Plus questions are often less about remembering a niche detail and more about choosing the next best step when several options look plausible. A drill works because it compresses the decision process into a small loop you can run repeatedly, training your brain to recognize patterns and act with purpose. The goal is not to rush blindly, but to become quick at identifying what matters, what is constrained, and what action increases certainty with minimal risk. This is audio-friendly practice because you can do it anywhere. And the repetitions build fluency in the same way athletes build reaction time. By the end of this episode, you should have a simple framework you can rehearse daily without needing notes or visual aids. The drill categories are intentionally simple because the exam is testing your judgment and prioritization more than your ability to label every technical nuance. Each prompt you practice will be answered using 4 quick identifiers: the phase you're in, the asset type you're dealing with, the constraint that limits your options, and the best action you should take next. Phase tells you where you are in an engagement lifecycle, such as reconnaissance, initial access, post-access validation, lateral movement, evidence handling, or cleanup. Asset type tells you the technology domain that shapes risks and controls, such as web, cloud, wireless, identity, or host. Constraint tells you what must be respected, such as scope limits, safety rules, operational windows, or data handling boundaries. Best action is the smallest step that increases certainty without creating unnecessary risk, and it should always align with objective and authorization. This structure is short enough to say out loud and strict enough to keep you from rambling. Here is the first practice prompt, and as you listen, your job is to identify the phase from the clue words rather than from the topic alone. You've obtained a valid low-privilege credential and can authenticate to one internal application, but you are not sure whether it grants access to other systems or data sources. The clue words are obtained, valid credential, authenticate, and not sure, which point to a post-access validation phase rather than initial access or full lateral movement. You already have a foothold, so you are not discovering externally. You are assessing what the foothold enables. The uncertainty is about scope and reach, which makes the decision about the next step a validation decision. When you can name the phase quickly, you stop guessing and start reasoning, because phase defines what best next action usually means. Once you've named the phase, you choose the asset type, because the asset type tells you what kinds of boundaries and evidence will matter most. In Prompt 1, the focus is on a credential and an internal application, so identity and host domains are both involved, but the immediate interaction is an application that enforces authorization. If the application is web-based, then the asset type is primarily web, with identity as the controlling layer, because you are testing what that identity can access through the application's interface. If the credential is an operating system credential and you're authenticating to hosts, then the asset type leans toward host and identity because you are assessing system-level access scope. A useful drill habit is to pick the asset type you are acting on next, not the asset type you think is most interesting. That keeps your answer grounded in the decision you are about to make rather than in a broad description of the environment. Constraints are the next piece, because constraints are where many exam questions hide the real answer. Scope limits might restrict you to specific subnets, specific systems, or a specific data class, which means even correct technical actions become wrong if they exceed authorization. Safety rules might prohibit disruption, persistence, or aggressive scanning, which should steer you toward minimal validation rather than noisy exploration. Time windows can also change the best next action, because you may need to choose an action that yields clear proof quickly instead of a deeper investigation that risks running out of time. In Prompt 1, the implied constraint is uncertainty about where the credentials should be tested, and the safe assumption is to test only authorized targets, using controlled validation rather than broad attempts. Saying the constraint out loud forces your answer to respect it, and it prevents you from choosing a tempting option that would violate rules even if it might work. Selecting the best action means choosing the smallest step that increases certainty while staying within scope and minimizing risk. For Prompt 1, the smallest step is to validate the credential scope against a small, authorized set of high-value targets that would meaningfully change impact if accessible. That action increases certainty because it answers whether reuse or overbroad authorization exists, but it does not require disruptive activity or broad guessing. The step should also produce evidence that can be documented, such as a confirmed access outcome or a clear authorization boundary. This is the pattern you want to train. Do not jump to maximum capability. Take the minimal step that converts uncertainty into knowledge. In exam terms, the best next action is rarely try everything, and it is rarely do nothing, because the exam is evaluating disciplined progress. When you say your chosen action aloud, it should sound careful, bounded, and purposeful.
Now take a second practice prompt. And this time, the drill is to eliminate 2 tempting wrong actions before you name the best one. During internal discovery, you find a reachable remote management service on a server, and you have a credential that might be privileged, but you do not have confirmation of authorization to access that server. 2 tempting wrong actions are to immediately attempt interactive access because it feels high leverage, and to attempt broad authentication across multiple servers to see where the credential works.
Both are wrong because they ignore the authorization uncertainty, and they create unnecessary noise and potential disruption. The better move is to pause and confirm scope and authorization boundaries, then proceed with a minimal, authorized validation if permitted.
Eliminating wrong actions out loud trains you to resist impulse, which is exactly what the exam tests when it offers plausible but reckless choices. You want your brain to automatically flag tempting but unsafe as a category.
The third prompt focuses on reporting language and evidence choices because readiness includes communicating decisions, not just making them. Prompt 3 sounds like this. You can access a directory that likely contains sensitive customer documents, but copying files would exceed minimum necessary evidence. The phase here is post-access evidence collection. The asset type is host or data repository, and the dominant constraint is data handling boundaries. The best action is to capture minimal proof of access without copying sensitive content, such as metadata, a listing with identifiers minimized, or a redacted sample that confirms sensitivity while protecting customer identities. The reporting language should use clear verbs like observed and confirmed, and it should state what was avoided and why, so the evidence story remains defensible. This prompt trains you to treat evidence as part of the security outcome, because mishandled evidence can become harm. On the exam, the best answer often aligns with minimum necessary data and safe documentation.
The fourth prompt emphasizes authorization and boundary compliance, because these are frequent decision gates in professional testing.
Prompt 4 sounds like this. A pivot host can reach a restricted network segment, but your authorization excludes that segment, and you are nearing the end of the approved time window. The phase is pivot decision-making, the asset type is network and host, and the constraint is explicit scope exclusion plus time. The best action is to stop and document the reachable path as a risk observation without entering the excluded segment, then notify the appropriate owner through the agreed engagement channel.
This respects authorization and still produces value by highlighting segmentation exposure and the need for monitoring without crossing boundaries. It also models the professional reality that being able to reach something does not mean you are allowed to test it. This prompt is meant to make boundary compliance feel automatic under pressure. Pitfalls in this drill are predictable, and naming them helps you avoid them when you practice.
Overthinking can cause you to second-guess and waste time, especially when the best next step is simply the smallest validation that reduces uncertainty. Ignoring constraints is the fastest way to pick the wrong answer on the exam, because constraints often define why an otherwise reasonable action is unacceptable.
Skipping phases is another trap, where you jump from discovery to exploitation or from access to impact without validating prerequisites or capturing evidence properly.
These pitfalls tend to appear when you focus on the most exciting option rather than the most defensible one. The drill is designed to keep you grounded by forcing you to name phase, asset, constraint, and action. When you adhere to the loop, you avoid the common traps that the exam intentionally exploits.
Quick wins come from using a short memory hook that you can say quickly. Phase, constraint, objective, action. Phase tells you where you are and what kinds of choices are appropriate in that moment. Constraint tells you what you must not violate, including scope, safety, and time, which eliminates many tempting wrong answers immediately. Objective tells you what you are trying to prove or learn right now, which keeps you from wandering. Action is the smallest step that increases certainty in the direction of the objective while staying within constraints. This hook is useful because it works across domains, whether you are thinking about web issues, host validation, wireless exposure, or reporting decisions. If you can say the hook in one breath, you can run the drill rapidly and consistently. Self-check is the final piece because you want to verify your decision quality rather than just picking an option and moving on. A simple self-check is to state why your choice fits better than the others, using one sentence that references constraints and certainty. For example, you might say, "This action is best because it confirms scope with minimal impact and stays within authorization," which immediately ties your answer to the exam's evaluation criteria. If you cannot explain why your choice fits better, that is a signal you may be choosing based on habit rather than reasoning. The self-check also trains you to defend your decision in reporting and in debriefs, where stakeholders will ask why you took a particular step. Over time, this builds confidence because you are not guessing, you are choosing with a clear rationale. That confidence is what makes you faster under pressure.
To summarize the drill loop in one sentence, you identify the phase and asset, state the constraint, choose the smallest action that increases certainty, and then explain why it is better than the tempting alternatives.
That one sentence is the rhythm you want to internalize, because it keeps you from jumping steps or drifting into unnecessary complexity.
When you can run that loop smoothly, you are practicing the exact skill the exam stresses, judgment under constraints. It also keeps your practice audio-friendly, because you can speak the loop aloud and hear whether your reasoning sounds controlled and professional.
The loop is not meant to be perfect. It is meant to be repeatable and improving.
Repetition is what turns a framework into instinct.
As we conclude episode 96, the drill is a practical way to build decision speed by repeating a structured reasoning loop until it becomes automatic. You name the phase, choose the asset type, spot the constraint, pick the smallest certainty-increasing action, eliminate tempting wrong moves, and then self-check your rationale in plain language. The daily habit is to run 5 prompts aloud, keeping each one short enough that you can answer in under a minute while still stating your reasoning clearly. Over time, you will notice that you hesitate less, You respect constraints more consistently, and you choose actions that are defensible rather than flashy. That is exactly the mindset that improves exam performance and real-world professionalism. When you can do the drill without strain, you are not just prepared to answer questions, you are prepared to think like a tester under pressure. Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit DailyCyber.News.